Hey everyone, this is Tom Salemi. Welcome back to the Device Talks Weekly Podcast. We're going to focus this entire episode on Cala Health. We'll have CEO Renee Ryan in the booth during Newmarker's Newsmakers. We'll have Deanna Harshbarger. She is Vice President of Product at Cala Health, talking about how Cala Health's design is helping to drive interest in the device. And then later on, we'll connect with Doug Biehn, who is Chief Commercial Officer and is in charge of building a market for the Cala Trio. So lots to learn about in this exciting area. I wanted to let you know that if you're interested in this sort of technology in sensors, you should really join us on Tuesday at our Device Talks Tuesdays, brought to you by Resonetics. The title is How Electromechanical and Fiber Optic Sensors Can Be Used to Collect Data in Medical Devices. Going forward, more medical devices will need to have sensor technology. So make sure you're on top of all the trends. Register at devicetalks.com for the Device Talks Tuesdays, which happens at 4 p.m. on Tuesday. You can watch it live or you can watch it on demand, but go to devicetalks.com to find out more information about our presentation by Resonetics. Before we begin this episode of the Device Talks Weekly Podcast, I want to remind you that Device Talks West is happening on October 19th and 20th. Once again, you can find out more information at devicetalks.com. Finally, I wanted to thank our friends at Acuity MD for sponsoring this episode. I have a short interview in the episode with CEO Mike Mahoney, who is at our Device Talks Boston conference and has also been part of our podcast. So it's great to have Acuity MD's story here. So in this first clip, I asked Mike, tell us about Acuity MD. Let's listen.
Thanks, Tom. Acuity MD is a software and data platform that accelerates access to medical technology. We were founded because we saw how difficult it was for med tech companies to gain visibility into their markets and to gain visibility into who uses their products on a daily basis. And at the same time, we saw the multitude of new data becoming increasingly available in the healthcare space. So we launched our first commercial product back in 2020, right at the start of COVID. And it was a targeting and CRM platform that helps medtech reps identify and predict new opportunities for their products and helps the commercial teams better forecast demand.
Well, thanks, Mike Mahoney, for that. If you want to find out more information about Acuity MD, go to acuitymd.com. Now let's get this podcast going. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Well, Chris Newmarker, how are you, sir?
Good to be here, Tom. Doing well. Moving
well
through the summer, hot summer in Minneapolis.
I know. We still have very temperate temperatures here in Boston. I hope it stays this way.
Wow.
60s, 70s. We are, but we'll pay for it in the end. We always do. Karma, man.
It was 100 degrees on Monday. I could have grilled without turning on my grill.
And you could have dried your clothes without your clothes dryer, which I know was broken as well, right? So
Yes, I'm into the intricacies of clothing dryer repair, which, fun story. When I was in college 100 years ago, I actually had a stint working at a dryer factory. So I knew more. I knew enough to get myself in trouble when the repairman came over. I was like, I could maybe have hung that belt 20 years ago, but I'm not going to try doing that now.
A dryer factory.
Yes.
All right. Were you attending school somewhere outside the U.S. or? I didn't realize
they still
make dryers here. Okay.
They still do. Yeah.
Let's move into another.
I know it's shocking.
Another very cool technology. Let's talk about medical technology. We've got a third person in the booth today. We have Renee Ryan, the CEO of Cala Health. Renee, hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's exciting to have you here. So I know we had tried to do this earlier and I got sick with something, but here we are. We're back together again. In fact, we dedicate this entire episode to Cala Health.
Woohoo. Wow.
We'll be talking with you, of course. We'll be talking with Deanna Harshbarger, the VP of Product. We'll hear from her a little bit later. And Doug Biehn, Chief Commercial Officer. He'll wrap up. So we'll have your Cala's whole life story here in today's episode. So it'll be a lot of fun. But first, Chris, I don't want to put any pressure on your kids, but interesting fact about Renee, she shared in the podcast when she was on the first time back in 2020. Renee skipped kindergarten.
Good for you.
Do not be impressed.
I know, Chris, you just had your oldest child finish kindergarten. I want you to know, no pressure. He still probably has a very bright future, even though he wasn't able to skip kindergarten.
Like, why didn't you come on? You could have exceeded past this. I mean, you could have copied more letters better and read more words. Your sight words. Work on your sight words.
That's right.
No, it was my mom was a single mom working, and there was an all-day preschool, and then there was a grammar school. That I was fortunate that my great aunt, who was a nun and an educator, she actually was the principal of the school, and so that was the only way I made it.
I had a great aunt who was a nun too.
You did? What was her name?
Her name was, oh my gosh, now Lorene Fetter. She born in 1900, passed away in the 90s.
Wow.
But I remember we'd go over to another great aunt's for dinner, and she'd be there, and she was still taking the bus around Columbus, Ohio in her 80s, collecting shoes for donation and stuff. But I just remember she had a really good way of just making me eat my vegetables and, making me toe the line, it would be good times.
Mine was named, she was Sister Lucy to all of us, Sister Lucida. And she came to my wedding, and I picked up her veil. She was bald as the day is long, no hair under her veil, but she had dyed her few gray hairs that she had this beautiful reddish orange color and curled them in honor of my wedding.
Oh my gosh, that is wonderful. That's great.
Wow, this was a gold mine. I just thought it'd be a quick kindergarten joke, but this is great. I have no nuns that I'm aware of in my family, but
you missed out, Tom. You missed out.
Fantastic. Well, Renee, let's fast forward a bit past kindergarten and talk about how did you find your way into the medtech industry again?
I always say the healthcare bug bit me. Out of college, I knew I was a good student. You've heard that story. I wanted to go somewhere where instead of paying somebody to learn, I was going to get paid to learn. So the two logical paths were investment banking and consulting. So I started in investment banking, a small boutique investment bank in San Francisco that focused on technology and healthcare. And my first project was a financing for a biotechnology company. And I was just blown away by what the impact of innovation could be in helping patients with certain diseases. And so that was it.
Wow. And you went from there to investing for JJDC?
After 16 long years, very long years of investment banking, I went to J&J as an investor. And then one of the companies I actually gave money to was Cala Health.
That's amazing. Was this the first company that you've invested in that you thought you might want to be part of?
I did a lot of work, as you know, in the surgical robotics area when I was at J&J. So I invested in Auris and I started Verb Surgical and spent a lot of time in those areas. And, my thought process was that maybe one day I would go that path. But as J&J began to acquire both Verb and Auris, I thought about the future a little bit differently, and I wanted to explore a real startup. And Cala was at the time about 35 employees. Today we're over 100, and it's just been a blast to grow this.
Very cool.
How we talked about Verb last week with Steve Osterley on the podcast. What is how do you feel about how that's gone? Are you able to share your opinion as to how that all worked out?
I have not. It was a huge development project. And so I know they're still working hard on it.
Yeah.
I read what you guys read, honestly, in terms of the press releases from J&J and Medtronic with the Hugo. I do know that the Monarch, which was a platform that Auris had advanced, is doing extremely well and continues to benefit lung cancer patients. And so that to me is, it's all about getting that innovation to a patient. And that's rewarding.
So let's talk about where you are now, about Cala Health. Tell us a bit about the company. We're going to learn all about it today with our interviews, but give us the 10,000-foot view.
So we have been commercialized with our first technology, the Cala Trio, since late 2019. I'd say we were in a kind of a beta launch mode for our first 2+ years. And as we got to know, you'll talk to Doug about this, we figured out what the growth formula was. We have started expanding our sales footprint. And so this year we've added, we're now up to 8 reps. We have in-market directors of payer relations. And we're beginning all the conversations with the payers. We've just come through an appeals process with CMS through early June. And so the footprint of Cala from a marketing and sales and market access perspective has grown dramatically.
And tell us a bit about Trio. How does it work? What does it do? And again, we'll learn a bit about it, but let's get folks. Let's not keep people in suspense.
Sure. So the mission of the company is to bring forward bioelectronic medicine to treat chronic diseases. And so no one was out there developing a neuromodulation wearable watch. And so that's what we had to build. And so we have a beautiful device. It was original de novo 510K back in 2018. It has a stimulator puck, which is at the top of the wrist, generates our proprietary waveform called TAPS, and then a band that wraps around the wrist that houses our proprietary electrodes. And so today we treat a condition called essential tremor. About 7 to 10 million Americans have this condition, and it is a progressive disease and gets more severe and more debilitating with time and age. And so the patients are shipped the device to their home. They put it on their wrist, and the first thing they do is they do what's called a tremor task. That task is assigned by the physician when they write the prescription. And what the device is doing during that task is a 20-second postural hold. The device is reading the frequency of the tremor. One of the aha moments that our founder had was that tremor itself is a temporal condition, has timing of the oscillations in the brain. And so we time the frequency of the tremor, set the stimulation pattern to meet the needs of that individual patient. Mm-hmm. Once that calibration is done, patient can start the device therapy, and they get a 40-minute dose of stimulation. And they often get upwards of 90 minutes of benefit, meaning tremor reduction after the stim is turned off.
It's amazing. It must be great to be part of something where you're seeing almost an immediate impact on a person's life.
Yeah.
I will tell you, we have many, many stories of patients who, almost as simple as we've restored their dignity. If they're not making a mess when they're out to lunch with their girlfriends or they're playing, bridge at the club, they are so happy and they're so pleased to have the tremor burden reduced.
That's amazing. So how is last question, and we'll kind of start rolling to the newsmakers. But so you went from investor to CEO. They're opposite sides of the table during the fundraising process, but other than that, they're also very different lines of work. What do you like about being a CEO? How was the transition?
I love it. I mean, important to me was having Kate Rosenbluth, our founder, stay on this journey. She's now our founder and chief scientific officer. And we've built a great team. I mean, you're going to meet Doug and Deanna. They're phenomenal people. And I'm so blessed to have just great people on our team. So the role from investor to CEO, was a journey I had not planned, to be fairly honest. It was an opportunity I just couldn't turn down or couldn't look away from, because the ability to do what we do, to deliver a new product into a market, create a market is almost unheard of, right? And so we knew there was a risk to take, and I have a pretty high risk appetite, and I hired great people, and here we are today. We're fighting the fight. But I do love the role. It is different than being an investor. But this is what I want to do right now, for sure. I'm all in.
Was there a moment that you remember, the kind of tipping point moment that led you to take the job? Like something that you saw or thought of, or any particular moment where you said, this is what I'm going to do?
Well, it was it was funny, because there were a lot of people from traditional neuromodulation who really wanted this job. I mean, let's be clear. This was a highly sought after role. But we, the search committee and the board, knew that we wanted to do it differently. We wanted Cala to be able to create its own market and create its own path. And so it was actually a conversation with my husband that prompted me to even think about this. And so I was on a plan to leave J&J after 8 years of being there, and was looking at a couple other alternatives. And my husband said, "What about Cala?" I said, I don't want to be a CEO. He said to me, "Well, what do they need, Renee? What do they need?" And I actually kind of thought about it for 2 days. And I said, they need me. I have a unique skill set. I have, obviously tremendous, strategy and deal making in my background, but also a passion for, honestly, for learning and for failing fast and making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. So it was sort of the combination of kind of what I had come from and also kind of where I wanted to go as an individual. And it matched perfectly.
That's fantastic. I love those. I love those moments where life takes a different turn.
I think it's really fascinating because, for now you're, treating essential tremor, but you're kind of trying to answer this question, like, what are all the things that we could potentially, treat with, kind of like wearable neurostim? It just sounds like an exciting question.
But that's exactly what we're doing, Chris. So we have a platform technology. And so we got really kind of focused on what are we building here, and really understanding that our TAPS waveform is proprietary. Our dry electrode material is a very unique way to deliver electricity into the body without hydrogels, without metal, right? And so the combination of those two things allows us to do a lot of look at a lot of different indications. And so we have a partnership with MGH. They're running 4 studies in vagal nerve using our stimulation platform and our electrodes with an auricular access point to the vagal nerve. We're running 3 of our own new studies on our wrist platform and our ear platform this year. So over the course of the next 12 months, we'll have data from upwards of 7 more indications beyond essential tremor. We're submitting our Parkinson's data to the FDA over the summer, so that's coming up soon.
Wow,
that would be a label expansion. Yeah, so there is a lot to treat. Electricity as a medicine is not new, but doing it in a wearable way is super cool and super impactful.
Yeah, very much so. It sounds like we're going to have you on again later this year. It sounds like there's going to be more news.
We do have Device Talks West coming up October 19th and 20th. So we'll hopefully we will have Cala represented there. But the past 2 years, I think, have been an interesting time for companies to sort of reorient themselves. We certainly did that with the podcast and with our webinars and things like that. How did you find the past 2 years were productive for Cala? Was it what were you not doing that allowed you to do what you needed to do?
I wasn't traveling.
Yeah, good point.
but we did what everyone did on March 16th. We went to a shelter-in-place mode, and we tightened our budget. We took out any extraneous expenses we didn't want to spend that year. And we also then realized that we are an essential employer, and we have products in patients' homes. We have the elegant opportunity and obligation to deliver product to our patients. And so we went back to the office by May of 2020. So we were in the office before there was testing, before there was any, hope of a vaccine, and we figured it out. I'm very proud of the company that we had 5 total diagnoses of COVID during our 2+ years of all of this, and no transmission, which means that we were wearing our masks, we were wiping everything down, we were super safe, making sure we're, washing our hands frequently, and we grew. We had a little bit of a slowdown around April of 2020 with our prescription volume, but by June of that year, we were back on a growth trajectory.
Fantastic. It was interesting. We did a supply chain conversation at Device Talks Boston, and there were more than a couple of panelists who sort of regretted how long they were out during COVID, that they wish they could do a do-over and find a way to get people back sooner. So
we're still in hybrid mode. We're still letting people work from home, especially people who like software coders and other folks who don't have to touch the device. But we had to bring in all of our manufacturing techs. We had to bring in the whole quality team. And so I felt as a CEO of the company, I had to be in too. Yep. So I was in probably 2 days a week in those early days, and we just kept figuring it out.
Now, this whole discussion about, hybrid work modes, that actually plays in really well to our number 5 Newmarkers Newsmakers.
Very smooth,
Newmarkers,
Chris.
There you go. I just slid that in there. All right.
This guy's a professional. Go ahead, Chris. What's number 5?
I learned from the best, Tom. I learned from the best. So, number 5 on the list is, Abbott is, they're kind of like trying to work through all these, like, how do we have, hybrid, work environments as, we, try to move beyond COVID. And it looks like one of their solutions was open some really hopefully cool offices in downtown Chicago that could be closer to some people's homes. So they're going to be opening offices on 2 floors of the Willis Tower in downtown Chicago. For people who are as old as me, they'll remember that this was the Sears Tower. It used to be the tallest building in the world. So, but yeah.
Isn't it like 100 floors or something crazy?
Yeah, more than 100 floors. So yeah, I mean, Abbott's only going to take 2 of those more than 100 floors of the Willis Tower. But yeah, not going to be their headquarters. But yeah, so for employees who are looking to get it back in the office more, and the downtown's closer to them than the north suburbs where Abbott is headquartered, then it looks like starting next year they'll be able to. Second half of 2023, they'll have offices to work at in downtown Chicago.
Wow, that's cool. So that'll help them avoid the commutes that they want to avoid, and give them a really nice view. Yeah.
Maybe even take a long lunch break, do a Cubs game. It'll be great. Good time.
You're going to move to any high rises at Cala there, Renee?
No, we just moved to our new office. We went from 16,000 square feet to 36,000 square feet.
Wow.
I know. So yeah, we have brand new offices in March of this year.
Where are you located?
San Mateo. Yeah, come visit. Fantastic. Beautiful.
We will be out there October 9th, 19th and 20th at Device Talks West. We'll definitely stop by. All right, Chris, what is number 4 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers?
Well, number 4 on the list was some good news for Medtronic's spine business. They got a clearance for their new LigaPass 2.0 ligament augmentation system for spine surgery. Actually, one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting about this was that the original LigaPass platform was developed by Medtronic, which Medtronic acquired in 2020. It got FDA clearance in 2016, but that was for like a much more pediatric use. So this kind of looked like an interesting example of something that started out more in the pediatric space and now becoming more of a general device. There's always this need for more pediatric devices. So it's kind of neat to see an example of like kind of the argument like, hey, you can do things that can help kids, and then we can expand this out and you have even larger markets out of it.
And I know Medicare also brought or gave Medtronic some artificial intelligence systems that could be used in the surgical planning, and I think LigaPass is all part of that as well. So.
And it looks like this is used to, it's designed to have a positive impact on PJK, that's like a common, post-operative complication that, involving adult spinal deformity surgery, where you can get even more, severe failures. So looks like a really good use.
Renee, this must have been a big part of what you were doing when you were at J&J? I mean, with their orthopedics platform, or was spine not a big part?
No, we supported the whole businesses. Yeah. So I literally supported, all, $28 billion of J&J medical device revenue with new investments. Yeah. A lot. You had to know a lot of body parts.
All right, now let's hear a little more about Cala Health from Deanna Harshbarger. She is the Vice President of Product at Cala Health. She's held similar positions at Medtronic, Boston Scientific, and J&J. We'll talk about her career in this interview, and we'll talk about what it's like to work on a product like Trio. But first, I want to bring back our sponsor, Acuity MD. I spoke with Mike Mahoney about Acuity MD's offering for the medtech industry for medical device companies, and asked him, how does Acuity MD work with medical device companies? Let's listen.
We primarily work with the sales and marketing organization at medtech companies and offer them 3 key value propositions. The first is that we help sales teams increase pipeline. And to date, since our founding, we've helped the medtech industry generate over $2 billion in new pipeline from using Acuity MD. The second value proposition is helping sales reps increase their win rates. So we did a study and looked at the top 10 most active sales reps on Acuity MD. So these were sales reps that were logging in daily and using the platform multiple times a day as they went to target and call on surgeons. And those top 10 sales reps saw a 25% increase in sales since adopting the Acuity MD technology platform. The third big value proposition that we offer is helping med tech companies save time across the organization. So we can implement our software in a week. So that's 1 week to get your sales reps targeting and building pipeline in Acuity MD. And, in the process, we save a lot of the manual effort the reps spend on researching information and manually entering it into other systems as well. And, we believe saving time kind of kickstarts this cursive cycle where the more time we save reps, the more time they have to go back and increase their pipeline and win more deals. And so everyone wins when you can save the sales organization time and give them a resource to build their pipeline.
Well, Deanna Harshbarger, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Tom.
It's great to talk about Trio, and we'll get into that a bit. But I wanted to understand a bit more about your role at Cala. But first, I'd like to know how you found your way into the medtech industry.
Sure. It was a long journey. So I'm not going to tell you how many years back, but many years ago, I was in a totally different space. I was a practicing chemical engineer, used to wear steel-toed boots and a hard hat.
Wow.
So, typical daily work attire.
I didn't realize chemical engineers required either a hard hat or steel-toed boots.
I worked in some chemical plants and it was a fantastic experience. But I think having been in that industry, I really wanted to do something different and get closer to customers. So I went on to business school, and in business school was really when I caught the healthcare bug. And I think it's fundamentally because having been in the chemical industry, I wanted to be in a different space where every day I could do something that really mattered to people that I was helping. And so postgraduate school I got into healthcare and never looked back. And in particular into med tech and the device space.
That's great. So you worked at Cordis, you were at Boston Scientific for a time in deep brain stimulation, and most recently at Medtronic. So you were your card has been punched by some big companies. Good for you. How did you find your way to Cala? What was the appeal?
Yes. So I really think Cala came along at the perfect timing. For me, I spent the majority of my med tech time in deep brain stimulation. So about 13 years there. Absolutely loved the brain, loved electricity as medicine, but really wanted to get into the digital space. And that's what took me to in the diabetic space into continuous glucose monitors, smart insulin pens, which is really where a patient has the opportunity to treat using digital, an app, for example. And Cala called me around that time. And I thought, wow, this is an opportunity to take two things that I absolutely love and combine them together, which is this really real opportunity to use electricity as medicine and also to be able to be in the digital space. And fundamentally, having spent so much time working with movement disorder patients, understanding the significant unmet need there is for essential tremor patients, I thought, shame on us if we are not offering people this amazing therapy to make their lives better. So I was like, great, how can I get on board?
That's great. And that's a great point as well. I mean, I feel like as a media guy, reporter, sometimes you try to apply these themes or statements to things that just happen. You try to give them a bigger meaning than perhaps they do. But it really does feel like we're at a point where the technology is allowing for patient empowerment and giving patient control over their own care. So that's not an overstatement. You feel like we're sort of at a tipping point as well?
I certainly do. I really look back over the past 5 years and you see this acceleration of people wanting to be in control of their own health, which is fantastic. And it's really been this shift from, oh, I will do whatever you tell me to do, doctor, to, well, in addition to what you're telling me to do, what else can I do personally? And how do I more holistically look at myself to be better? And we are seeing that come from a space where historically, just under government regulation, things have been slower in the past. And I think COVID really accelerated that. And now we're at a point where all parties involved want to be able to get better. And this is the way to do it.
Absolutely. So you joined Cala as vice president of product. Tell me, what does a vice president of product do at Cala?
Yes. So my team's job is to really look holistically at what we put in front of patients and healthcare providers and ensure that they have a holistic best experience. And that's a broad term, but fundamentally under that is, are we providing the proper efficacy for the patients? Are we making it easy to fit into their lifestyle instead of forcing something onto them? And then from the healthcare provider standpoint, are we basically helping to carry the burden to get their patients to a better outcome? Our job is to be able to be a partner in that process. So we look at that holistic experience end to end and say, what do we provide to patients and healthcare providers to get there?
So who are the troops, for lack of a better word, sort of under that effort when you're designing for a patient? Are you involved with product design, with user interface, all of the above? Is it all kind of coming up through your group?
All of the above. And I like to say that, and we just had a conversation in the organization the other day, every single person at Cala is involved in providing this to our patients and to our healthcare providers. And so, we really go through a process, which I think is fundamental to med tech and to the device space, which is what you call the standard development process. And so that starts with really understanding what are the needs of the patients, what are the needs of the healthcare providers, what are the needs of Cala, and what are the needs of the payer group so that we can get access to our patients. And so we look at those needs and we say, okay, then how do we solution something that will fit all of those needs that's a value add? And then that takes us into the standard development process. And so from a design standpoint, we are looking at how do we make the best experience? And that's where UI comes in, design comes in, research and development, digital. So really every person.
Great. So talk as if we just met at someone's barbecue. What does a Cala Trio look like? How does it sit on a patient's body?
Yes. So Cala Trio is similar to a watch. It sits on your wrist and you are able to get treatment whenever you need that treatment. So if I'm a patient with tremor and I want to be able to sit down and I want to be able to have my coffee, all I need to do is put on my Cala Trio, and it's like a watch. You put it on just like a watch, and it has a button on it. And you press that button, you go through a couple prompts, and it helps you get stimulation. And you'll feel a little bit of a stimulation. And that's how you also know that it's working. And then about 15 minutes into having that stimulation, you'll start to see a change in your tremor.
Amazing. So two sides of this. There's the therapeutic part, or the part that is effective in slowing the tremors. The other part is just you kind of buzz through it quickly, but it's pushing two buttons. How much thought goes into that side of the aspect, the patient interface, and how do you draw the information you need from patients to ensure that part of the product runs as smoothly as possible?
Yes, there is a lot of thought. So things that are well designed, you don't even think about them.
Mm-hmm, right.
Use them. And so that's our goal. So really what we do is first, there's typically a form of like ethnographic research, it's called, where you go out and you would actually follow a patient and see what it is they're going through in a day, for example. And not only do you ask questions, but I think everyone always says a picture is worth 1,000 words. You actually videotape so that you can see what it is and where the struggles are. And so then you take that information back and you come up with a concept design, and then you take it back out to a patient. And we look at patients that have already been using our system and those that have never used it before and never considered it. And we don't give them any instruction. We just put it into their hands and you see what happens from there. And that tells us a lot about how should we do that setup? How do we make it so that it is very intuitive?
Interesting. And how do you factor physicians into the design as well? Do you need to sell them on it, or do you need to sell it to the patients? How important is the physician input? In the user side, obviously it needs to be effective and therapeutic, but
it's equally important because that physician, that healthcare provider has to make the decision to say, this is a right solution for you as a treatment. So they have to prescribe. And so they have to make sure that it's valuable for the patient. So that goes back to the usability. You also mentioned the efficacy. The other piece is, how do we ensure that we're not putting burden on the healthcare provider? And we want to make sure that it's very simple for them to prescribe and their patients don't have any issues with it or any questions. And so we do a similar process with them as well. They are the ones that see the patients day in and day out. And so while we do our own research and we are watching the patients, they are seeing hundreds, if not thousands of patients. And so their input is very important.
How different is this? I mean, it is different, but how different is this process from previous products you've worked on where, deep brain stimulation, patients don't have any input on that at all? They're not going to be mostly, I guess perhaps if there's applying the energy to the brain, but how does this compare to other medical device companies where all the activity happens inside the patient or inside a surgery where the patient never has any interaction with the device? Is it a completely different process?
It's not completely different. It's more expanded.
Mm-hmm.
And so exactly as you're saying, in other places where it is something that the physician makes the decision of what to do and the patient never has any interaction with it, a stent, for example, You don't come in emergent on the table and say, "Oh, I'll take that one."
Right.
I think it'll fit me better.
Yeah.
Right. That is all. That is all decision by those that are qualified to make that decision. And so the difference is with what we do at Cala is we have to look 100% at what that patient goes through, because the outcome, the efficacy is based on how they interact with the system. And so that is a process that's much more in depth that we do at Cala and isn't done. Not that the patient is not at the center of everything all healthcare companies do, it should be, but the interaction and the dependency on the outcome is very critical for Cala because the patient is making the decision when and how to use.
It's a great point. So what does your follow-up look like with patients once they have a Cala? Do you have a system for checking in with them 6 months, a year down the road, more constantly?
All of the above.
Yeah.
And so once a customer, always a customer, because that interaction is very consistent throughout. We always want to be there for the patient and any questions they have. So once they get Cala, we ship it directly to their house. They open it up and then they can do a couple different things. One is they can go online. We have a patient portal where they can do their setup and follow along online. Not everybody wants to do that. So equally, we offer onboarding. And so the patient would set up, in essence, like a Zoom call with Cala, and we individually walk them through, answer any questions that they have to ensure that they absolutely understand how to do the setup, how to use it, any other questions that they might have. And so that's the start of our relationship together. And then the patients, they vary on their usage depending on what is the best need for them. But what we've seen in our real world data is that patients are using it approximately once a day. Mm-hmm. And so that relationship is there every day. Every day that they use it, they are actually getting data about what their outcomes are. And what we do is we actually do surveys with them. We call them and we do checkpoints in at 30, 60, 90 days. And then we'll do a longer term survey on a 6-month and a 12-month. And they can call us anytime. They can email us anytime.
And just final question: how does all this inform where you're going next with the Trio? Are you taking this patient information and developing new ideas, new applications, future iterations?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our objective is to get them the best efficacy and have it fit into their life. And so we always call it making sure that for everyone it's burden-free. So we would love to get to the point where we're basically tapping the patient on the shoulder saying, "Hey, it's time to put your Cala on right now. Mm-hmm. And don't worry about a single thing, just push the button. And then we will tell you when is the best time to use it." And so that data that is coming from the patient, they get an opportunity to see how they're doing. We're also taking a look at that to say, "Oh, is there a way that we can make this better for you?" And that means 1, from an efficacy standpoint, and 2, from an overall usage standpoint. So they don't have to think about it. They have enough going on in their life.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate the insights on the work you do and on the device that you're offering. It's really a neat addition to a very troubling disease, or a neat solution for a very troubling disease. So thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
All right, Chris, let's roll on to number 3 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers.
Well, this news was out last week, but we skipped last week. So I'm throwing in a few things from last week. We had FDA clearing Ekso Bionic's robotic exoskeleton for use with MS patients. So just like greatly, expanding the use of their exoskeletons. So, some good news in that space.
Interesting.
I was just saying, some weeks we have some real doozies, in these, but it looks like we're having like more positive news this week.
Yeah, no layoffs or recalls this week, it looks like.
Exactly.
But this is all cool stuff, the exoskeleton opportunities. Is this something that, Renee, I don't know, I'm thinking about someone who's having trouble with tremors or control of their body. They have this and they have a bioelectronic component to it as well. Do you look at sort of how what you're doing might ultimately work into a larger robotic exoskeleton system that could support a person?
We haven't looked that direction. We think an interesting opportunity for Cala in particular is to go more of the neuromod plus drug angle. And so there are conditions like MS has very many symptoms associated with it. So for some of those multi-symptom diseases, having a combination may actually be the win for the patient. Hand tremors or essential tremor, the primary symptom is the most bothersome symptom, and it's the one we're treating, which is tremor of the hands. But it also has voice tremor and head tremor that goes along with it. But those tend to be less bothersome to our patients. But MS is one that we watch because there are not a lot of great alternatives. I think there's a new drug that's come out that is pretty effective, but there's still so much opportunity to help those patients.
And the pairing of the drug with the trio or whatever technology would be basically the drug would get you to a point, and then the trio would sort of bring it to the finish line and help stop the tremor even more.
Yeah, in tremor, we take all comers, and so patients are oftentimes on medications when they're adding our device to their care path. We actually also are looking at other conditions where there may be more severity to a condition at certain points, whereas maybe a daily stim dose could control certain episodes, but for more acute episodes, they'll take the drug. So there's all sorts of different ways that we're thinking about it. More to come as we think about our future pipeline.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, Chris, what's number 2 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers?
All right. Well, number 2 on the list. This was also last week. Boston Scientific agreeing to purchase Synergy Innovations majority stake in MI Tech, and MI Tech has a family of conformable, non-vascular, self-expanding metal stents for the periphery. So this is just like an example of Boston Scientific just like expanding its portfolio. And we even had an analyst at BTIG. Marie Thibault, saying that this gives Boston Scientific the opportunity to complement its non-vascular stent portfolio and bolster its international presence. So it's just about, Boston Scientific growing its portfolio. $230 million.
That's fantastic.
Right.
No, they've been a big time acquirer of late. It's nice to see them continue. And I see the company's based in Korea.
Yes.
So. And they're
acquired Korean company,
manufacturer and distributor of medical devices for endoscopic and urological procedures. So I wonder if they do any more manufacturing there or if they'll just continue to manufacture the products they have. Is this another manufacturing spot for Boston Scientific?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. We might have to ask about that.
Well, we will have Mike Mahoney on the podcast in a couple of weeks. So maybe I'll try to slip that one in there and see if
slip that one in.
Oh, great! I tipped him off. Now he's going to hear this and know what
I'm
going to
exactly.
Yeah. They're taking notes.
I had a really fun trip with Mike Mahoney right before he left J&J. The cause of it, I don't know. He actually came out to California, and we took him around to a bunch of VCs, to Stanford, a bunch of our portfolio companies, and I think over the course, he kind of came in a little bit skeptical. And by the time he left, he's like, I love venture. This is great. It's so exciting. He left like 2 weeks later.
How was that? Could you speak to just, how was his departure seen at J&J? I mean, he was obviously a leader there. Was it, I don't want to apply any real negative terms to it, but how was it? What was the impact on folks when he decided to take the Boston Scientific job?
Well, he went in as the number 2 when he first started there.
That's right.
Right. I would say I was new to J&J. My impression was that he had a lot of fans around the company.
Yeah.
So he was considered a very good leader, tough, he was pretty, he kept things on time. So he's, very disciplined, but he was very well liked. So I think it was a disappointment for many people.
It was interesting at the time, like that he left because, they're like J&J was friendly enough with Boston Scientific about the move that even caused some speculation back then that there's going to be a merger going on, which it's kind of funny. Like it's back again. People are chatting about that again.
I was having been an investment banker. I always said I modeled all of those all the time. You kept your model and you just refreshed it every quarter for all those.
We had Mike Madsen on last week as to why it would make a lot of sense. It would make a lot of sense, but again, as a Boston guy, I'm against it. I want Boston Scientific to remain an independent entity. All right, Chris, what is number?
It'd be like the Red Sox moving to New York. Like, we can't have that happen. I mean,
bite your tongue, son. No baseball
on this episode.
No baseball. All right, it's a loud lot. Okay.
No baseball.
All right, you're the guest. You get to set that rule. All right, Chris. What's number one on Newmarker's Newsmakers, Chris?
All right. Number one on the list, we have GE Healthcare unveiling a wireless patient monitoring platform. The portable mobile platform they're marketing this as wirelessly monitoring patients throughout their entire hospital stay. So I mean, just as anyone who's been in the hospital or has had people who've unfortunately had to end up in the hospital. I mean, there are a lot of wires. So, the word wireless sounds good.
I agree. But I also think there's a big trend towards healthcare at sort of was like, I read that and I thought, nice move. It's important to get rid of the wires for sure. But there's more opportunity even outside the hospital.
I know Stryker with the Vocera acquisition, I think, is looking at a lot of these opportunities as well to really turn the hospital bed into a data collection center where you can really track the patient. So,
yeah.
But you're right, Renee. I think the home care stuff is where the future's at. Although I guess we'll always need hospital beds, unfortunately. Is this number one, Chris? Because you're still trying to get Medtronic to buy GE Healthcare. You're trying to create your own little little rumor, aren't you?
There is a lot of collaboration between those two.
All right, let us bring in our next interview. I talked with Doug Biehn. He's Chief Commercial Officer at Cala Health. He previously served at iRhythm, where he was Executive Vice President of Marketing. And before that, he was Chief Operating Officer at AliveCor. We'll talk about his career path and, of course, what Cala Health is doing to roll out the trio. But first, I want to complete my conversation with Mike Mahoney, the CEO of Acuity MD. In this next clip, Mike will talk about Acuity MD's recent round of capital. Mike, I understand you recently raised a significant round of capital.
Absolutely. We recently announced our $31 million Series A. That was led by Redpoint Ventures, which was a venture fund behind Snowflake and Stripe and some great enterprise businesses. And they joined our existing investors, Benchmark Capital, who invested in Uber and OpenTable and eBay and some great consumer and enterprise businesses as well as Ajax Health, which is a medtech focused fund. So, really lucky to have the best software investors, as well as the best medtech investors on our cap table as we look to build a medtech software solution of the future.
That's a great investor pedigree. Acuity MD is bringing in a lot of data and know-how into the medtech sales process. How do you see this industry sort of changing in the future?
Tom, I'm not great at reading the tea leaves, but I do know one thing, which is that the pace of medtech innovation is going to continue to increase and more products are going to come on the market that are more innovative than the previous ones. And it has to happen. If there's anything that the last few years has taught us, it's that innovation in the medical technology space needs to keep progressing, and we have a lot of work to do. So in that world where thousands of new technologies and products are getting approved, the med tech rep has a really important role to play to getting those technologies out to market efficiently. And med tech sales reps are really great at educating and training surgeons on the latest technologies for their procedures. They should be spending all of their time doing that and accelerating access to those technologies. Anytime they spend behind a computer entering notes into a legacy CRM or software system or filtering a long Excel sheet is a tax on this mission. And unfortunately, for the longest time, the med tech industry has not been given a specialized software to fit the unique needs and workflows of their reps. And so the reps have been forced to fit these clunky general purpose horizontal software tools that were built for other industries and for other sales processes. And they've been forced to fit these into the extremely nuanced surgical commercial workflow of the med tech industry. So I see a big industry trend towards med tech companies adopting new technology platforms that suit the med tech commercial process in a new way and empower their reps to be more efficient, productive, and successful, really be a force multiplier to help the reps sell and get new technologies out to market more efficiently.
All right. Well, thanks, QDMD, for sponsoring this episode of the Device Talks Weekly Podcast. Once again, for more information, you can go to acuitymd.com. Well, Doug Biehn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm excited to learn this part of Cala's story. Wanted, though, first just to find out a bit about your your path to Cala? Because you've worked at a couple of equally, I think, innovative companies, AliveCore and iRhythm. But before that, you were at Stanford. You worked at in the insurance industry for a payer. Let's kind of turn the clock back a bit. What led you to join the medtech industry? Was it your work at your study at Stanford first? What was your first experience?
It was thanks for asking. It was a very kind of, I would call it an indirect or a career pivot. My early days, I was in the brand management business. I was helping companies like Microsoft, Intel, the Olympics manage their brands. And it was one of my clients at the Olympics that said, "Hey, Doug, check out this leadership opportunity at Blue Shield of California." I'm like, why in the world would they be interested in me? And why would I be interested in them? I got no healthcare experience. But I took a leap and I learned. And at the end of the day, when I was thinking about brands at the core are relationships with people. What's more important to people than their health? And if you look at healthcare in general from a marketing lens, the bar is pretty low. So I thought it was a great opportunity to make a difference and create impact.
I don't see a lot of folks, though, make the transition from payer to startup into running a company or working for a medtech company. What was the moment where you realized you wanted to remain in healthcare, obviously, but wanted to do it differently?
Yeah, that's a great question. I spent a lot longer than I expected in the payer world. The good thing about the payer world, you see very different vectors. You see it from the consumer lens, you see it from the provider lens, you see it from the reimbursement payer lens, regulatory lens. So it's a great training ground for all things healthcare. But from there, I got the bug, and I've been ever since committed to helping bring our antiquated healthcare system into the 21st century. And towards the tail end of my tenure at Blue Shield of California, I was like, how can I help make the biggest difference possible? And where is innovation going to happen? And I really felt innovation was going to happen in these earlier stage market making technology companies. And so I wanted to be at the epicenter of that because I felt that's where the change is going to happen. That's where we're going to bring this healthcare system into the 21st century.
What did that transition look like?
Well, I mean, it was a very challenging transition because you go from a very large bureaucratic organization like a health insurance company to a fast-moving, ambiguous, nimble, early stage environment where from a leadership perspective, you have to think very different. So the perspective I gleaned from the payer world was very helpful, but from a leadership perspective, I had to really build new muscle in being comfortable in ambiguity, moving at fast pace, doing things differently in a system that often blocks innovation. And so it was an amazing learning curve for me as a leader.
So your first job was with Relay Health. How did you come to at least first job after post-payer first job was out of Relay Health? How did you decide upon that opportunity?
Well, if you think about the healthcare system, unlike take any other industry, e-commerce, retail, entertainment, everything is accessible and transparent. In healthcare, everything is black box and not transparent. And one of the biggest problems is information is not liquid. It's all stuck in these different silos. And what was great about Relay Health is they were creating transparency of information between provider and patient. So patients and providers can be on the same page and better manage care and their costs. And they were the first kind of internet-based patient to provider telehealth platform that created liquidity of data across different health systems. Also, the provider could see one kind of view of that patient, irrespective of the EMR system they were on. So that to me was that's a huge problem in the industry. It's still a problem today. And they were definitely an early innovator in that space.
That certainly seems like an appropriate bridge for someone to move from the payer community to the tech community. So how did you ultimately move over to iRhythm, which is an exciting company in the, I want to say the medtech space, but it's data, it's tech, it's a little bit of everything. But yeah. What happened there?
Well, prior to that, I spent about 2 years helping grow AliveCore, which was the first FDA-cleared smartphone-based EKG platform that was disrupting how cardiologists engage with their patients and diagnose and treat atrial fibrillation. And so we became one of the most innovative companies by Fast Company, and we were growing. And I had built a relationship with Kevin King over the years, who was the CEO of iRhythm. And the big challenge that iRhythm was up against is we've been growing, but how do we continue to grow now as a public company? And so, my mission in joining iRhythm was, how can I help iRhythm continue to grow at pace and really penetrate the large health system marketplace in which iRhythm becomes a new standard of care? That was my challenge. And when I joined iRhythm, that's what attracted me to that opportunity. And I was there almost 4 years.
You held different roles at iRhythm and AliveCore, now at Cala. Let's talk about what you're doing at Cala. What is your role as Chief Commercial Officer?
Yeah, so I'm trying to help the company expand patient access and drive growth at scale for the company. And so specifically responsible for all things revenue, sales, market access, marketing, et cetera, and obviously partnering across the whole organization in building this brand and bringing it to marketplace.
And how does Cala's experience situation differ from AliveCore and iRhythm? I explained before we pushed record that it just occurred to me that AliveCore and iRhythm, I think we're applying new technologies to sort of existing pathways, where Cala is bringing a new treatment system that wasn't previously available. So it seems to be a lot greener field. You kind of started to swat away my observation, which is great. What were the similarities between what you're doing now at Cala's opportunity and the opportunities that AliveCore and iRhythm had?
Yeah, I think you did a good job, Tom. Both AliveCore and iRhythm were disruptive technologies in given categories, antiquated categories that hadn't seen innovation in a long time. And I think what's different is Cala is actually creating an entirely new category on how to treat different patients and patient types. You're really making a marketplace. You're not transforming a marketplace, you're actually creating a marketplace. I think what's similar, though, especially with iRhythm and Cala, is both organizations are founded on a massive patient unmet need or treatment gap. And both of the organizations are providing novel, safe, and effective therapies that didn't exist before. They're solving a major problem. And I think if you look more broadly into digital health or digital therapeutics, organizations that are able to innovate new therapies, new diagnostics that change the way physicians treat and care for their patients in a clinically meaningful way, those are the winners. And that's one of the most attractive things about iRhythm, especially as why I was lured into coming over here to Cala, is that there's a real difference to be made to really help physicians and help patients with their care.
So what does your opportunity look like at Cala, or what does your approach look like in Cala? I mean, you have a treatment for a previously untreated disease. It would seem like the idea of building out the commercial opportunity is just let people know about it. We've got this thing that can help you. I'm sure it's a lot more complex than that. What is it like to build out a commercial strategy for a product that is treating a previously untreatable condition?
Let me start with our North Star, because that's really what's really compelling here. Our North Star is to pioneer this idea of bioelectronic medicine to free people from the burden of their chronic disease. And today, our focus from a chronic disease perspective is on people who struggle with movement disorders, specifically in essential tremor, for example, where people over time have this progressive disability in which their hands shake at high frequency, which prohibit them from drinking water, from cooking, from socializing. And as a result, they become socially isolated, higher incidence of mental health, higher incidence of substance abuse. It's very complex. And until Cala, there's really been very limited treatment options. Most of these patients, because they progress over age, have other comorbidities in which they're taking other medications. And so to add another medication when you're already taking a number of medications, there's tons of side effects, which are debilitating. So that then therefore becomes not an option to treat their condition. The only other option, Tom, is surgical, which is hugely invasive. Who wants to have brain surgery? I don't. And then it's from a healthcare system perspective, it's very costly. And so therein lies that huge gap in care that, one, don't enable physicians to operate at the top of their license. And two, more importantly, patients, don't have the quality of life that they're seeking. And so it's a huge problem. And then that's today where we're focused. And I think what's compelling about Cala and our TAPS therapy is that it's the only proven, safe, and effective with no side effect therapy that these patients can use on demand or throughout their daily living to treat their tremor so they can actually dress themselves, so they can actually eat, so they can actually socialize with confidence and be themselves again and do the things they love. And so it's incredible to be part of that mission, part of that organization, because this stuff really works. It really makes a difference.
That's great. So what are the levers that you are able to pull or that you see that need to be pulled to open up the market opportunity for Cala? I imagine there's patients, there's physicians, and probably payers as well. How do you see the levers that you need to sort of manage to open this market up?
Yeah, so at the highest level, we're trying to build this innovative commercial engine that's repeatable, predictable, and scalable, not only for movement disorder, but beyond, because we have other indications that we're in development with. And so with that engine, if you look at the marketplace, I call this a two-sided marketplace. It's no different than Uber or Airbnb. In our case here, you have the consumer. What we have to do is we have to educate consumers that there is an alternative that's safe and effective and get them to engage with the brand and actually create pull in the marketplace to introduce this therapy to physicians. And then if we do that really, really well, they'll use it and they'll continue to use it and they'll advocate on our behalf to other friends or family. The other side of the marketplace is the provider, right? You really have to demonstrate with clinical evidence to providers that you've got a therapy that's going to change the way they're going to treat their patients, and it's proven. And then you got to prove that we're not going to clog up your workflow, that we're going to easily integrate in your day-to-day workflow. And if you do that really well, you do that consistently, you build that trust, and then they'll tell their peers and their markets that, Cala is a new standard of care. If you could do that well, that two-sided marketplace, you create that flywheel effect. And that's what we're really focused on, is how do we create that flywheel effect? And you mentioned it, access, affordable access to care, especially in the US, is critical. We have a number of strategies that we're executing on right now to expand patient access, both on the government side with Medicare, as well with commercial payers, either through Medicare Advantage or their commercial benefit plans.
Who are the physicians that you're connecting with?
That's a great question. So not all physicians are created equal. A typical initial point of care is your general physician, your GP. Mm-hmm. What we find is general practitioners are what I would call the dabbler. They'll have a patient, they may be prescribed, but then they won't continue to prescribe. So what we're really looking to do is really establish a new standard of care. And the primary physician is your general neurologist. That's the physician who really has poor choices today. They either have drugs, as I explained, come with a lot of side effects and high discontinuation rates. That doesn't feel good to prescribe because they're not going to work. Or the other alternative is to refer the patient for surgery, which very few, less than 1% patients qualify, let alone be interested in surgery. So the general neurologist sees Cala as a safe and effective therapy option that adds to their toolkit. They can better manage their patient population. And so the general neurologist and the movement disorder specialist are the two primary call points for us from a commercial perspective. And if you look at where the patients' flows are, it's those practices that really see kind of an organic flow of patients looking for solutions.
So how do you win over those physicians? Obviously, the therapy has to work and you've got that down, but do you demonstrate to a single one? Do you really kind of make a strong case with a small number of people and win them over and hope it spreads from there? Or do you sort of plant a lot of seeds and hope that you'll get a critical mass of the community to refer? It's probably a combination of both, but what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first, what we don't do, and I think this is a good lesson learned, we don't go into market and chest beat how cool our technology is. Look how great these speeds and feeds are. You should try it. What we try to do is position Cala as a partner with these physicians, these neurology physicians and practices, in that we are helping them raise their standard of care and help them as a practice differentiate their level and quality of care to their existing and prospective patients. And by doing that, we really kind of deliver on 4 dimensions. It's like, first and foremost, improving the clinical outcomes of their patients. So we really reinforce how does Cala do that. The second is how do we really demonstrate how we are engaging and satisfying their patient population for them to trust us to prescribe Cala. And then third, this often is overlooked, but physician burnout is real. I mean, all you need to do is Google physician burnout, and you'll get tons of published studies on how taxed physicians are with seeing more patients with less time and administrative burdens, et cetera. And so if you add a click to their workflow, I'll tell you, no matter how cool your technology is, they will not prescribe it. So our third area of focus is how can we make it as easy as possible for these physicians and practices to prescribe Cala and manage their patients. And fourth, this is more of a system or a payer level dimension, is how do we lower the total cost of care? And so essential tremor patients, for example, are typically much more complex than non-essential tremor patients, and they have a much higher cost burden on the system. And so we also incorporate how when patients are on Cala, how they stay on Cala, they comply with Cala, they're seeing the clinical effect with Cala over time to demonstrate a more cost-effective alternative. And those are the four dimensions that we're really focused on. And if you could do that, Tom, then the physician, the nurse, the practice manager see that you as a partner, Cala as a new standard of care, and then repeatedly start to prescribe Cala as part of their protocol. So you have to think about that care continuum.
How is Cala prescribed? How does a patient get Cala? I don't even know if it's prescribed.
First of all, a physician has to do an evaluation to really assess the severity of their tremor, what activities of daily living can they and can't they accomplish with regards to their tremor. They have to assess the alternatives of treatment, such as medication or us or surgery. Oftentimes, these patients have tried multiple medications and have failed. A very typical situation, Tom, is a patient comes back in and say, "Doc, this, like you said, this medication comes with too many side effects. I can't deal with it. What alternative do you have?" And then the physician will prescribe it. And what's so easy about our solution, it's a remote-based solution. So once a physician prescribes, we kind of take over that patient relationship. We do the patient outreach, we do the patient education, we work with their insurance provider to get coverage, and then we support them along the way, because people don't wake up in the morning and say, "Oh, I'm going to go take a bioelectronic medicine." Right? We got to help get them comfortable with that experience and trust that experience and see the value for themselves. And so we do all that on behalf of the physicians. And then we provide that closed loop feedback back to physicians to say, "Hey, these are your patients that are on Cala. Here's the kind of experience they're having. Here's a clinical effect." And we try to keep them obviously owning that patient journey, but we support that remotely.
And that's so much to get through. And I obviously could talk about this for a long time, but it's a lot to convey to physicians who you just said are burnt out. And obviously, if they're burnt out, they're not necessarily the most approachable people for a salesperson they've never talked to before, especially with the device that they don't know anything about. How do you overcome that maybe initial resistance that they have to just having someone else talk to them for 15 minutes about something?
I'll say maybe three things. First of all, as I mentioned, this category is ripe for innovation. The clinical guidelines haven't been updated for decades. So these physicians, you think a physician likes it when they have a patient that has a real debilitating condition and they don't have an alternative? They don't like being in that situation. They're not able to operate at the top of their license. So there definitely is interest from neurologists and movement disorder specialists of what is a new and safe and effective alternative. And so you definitely get those folks that are leaning in. The other way is, the patient. The patient is a powerful advocate for his or her own care. And so when a patient comes in and says, "Hey, doc, I saw this, I've done my own research, here's some information that Cala provided me," that often is a great trigger for that initial prescription. And then I would say third, and maybe most profound, Tom, and this is where I think any early stage med tech, digital health company really needs to focus on, is the clinical evidence. One thing that Cala has done so well, aside from such an elegant innovation, is they really have spent time early on building that clinical evidence. And by having clinical evidence that is reputable, credible, published, robust, that's the information that physicians listen to. They're not going to listen to a slick salesperson that's got a great pitch.
Right.
They want to see the evidence. And that's something that Cala has done really, really well. They overinvested early on the generation of clinical evidence versus accelerating commercialization too early. And so I think that's one of the things that they've done so well that any organization, especially at an early stage, can really learn from.
So kind of in closing, Cala is a great example of bioelectronic medicine that's actually, we're beginning to see it deliver. We're seeing the term used more broadly. Medtronic and others are using it. It's out there. I think it's something people are going to become more familiar with. As you're telling this unique story, what is it that the tip of your spear to sort of get the word out? Is it content to reach those patients, to get them comfortable and sort of get them as allies? Is it, again, the data for the physicians and giving you choices? So it's probably going to be a combination of both. But what has Cala learned from this experience that other bioelectronic medicine companies might be able to copy in a good way, in a flattering way?
Yeah, in our case, if I have $1 to spend, to your question, where am I spending that dollar to make this marketplace, to create this marketplace? This is a prescribed treatment. This is not something you get to buy off on Amazon. This is not a wellness, therapy. This is a prescribed therapy. And your physician is your gateway. And so, from a dollar perspective, we're definitely spending, I'd say 50 cents of that dollar on helping physicians, neurology, general neurologists, movement disorder specialists understand the clinical value of this new therapy option for their patients. The other part of the dollar we're spending is how do we get those that pay for it, the government, Medicare, commercial payers, to understand the complexity of this patient population. I can tell you right now, a medical director from any large payer, regional payer, national payer, it doesn't matter. They don't wake up in the morning and say, essential tremor patients are on my top 10 priority list. That's just not the case. And so it's our job to help them understand the complexity of this patient population, the gap in care that they have, the cost to the system, and connect those dots, and why Cala is a great solution for the payer to offer to their members to provide better quality care to their members and differentiate their plans. And so we're spending a lot of time there to expand that access, because in the US, if you don't have affordable access, you're not going to get adoption. And then the remaining part of that dollar is spent on helping consumers understand their options and helping them, make it easy for them to understand, make it easy for them to use, and making it easy for them to afford. And that's the other part of the dollar that we're spending.
Well said. Very good imagery. So that explains it well. Doug, I've enjoyed the conversation. Obviously, thanks for joining us in the podcast.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for having us.
All right, Chris Newmarker and Renee Ryan. This is the time where we tell people how to find us out there on the internet. Renee, you are our guest. So please, where can folks find you and Cala?
Yeah, you can find it Cala at www.calahealth.com. We've got all the information about the company, our product, the conditions we're treating, and we'd love to connect with anybody.
It's awesome.
Chris Newmarker, where are you on social media?
Hey, you can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Newmarker, just like a new marker. Also on Twitter at Newmarker. Always happy to connect.
Fantastic. I'm on Twitter as well at MedTechTom. I rebooted my Instagram account. That is at MedTechTom as well. I don't know why, but if you want to see what my dog looks like, find me on Instagram. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn. Connect with me there. Please do share episodes of this podcast and this particular episode on those social media channels.
You can follow, subscribe.
That's right. You got to follow, like, and subscribe to this podcast so you get future episodes of Device Talks Weekly, Intuitive Talks, and Stryker Talks on this channel. And you can also subscribe separately to Medtronic Talks on their channel so you don't miss a future episode of any of those great programs. And finally, we'll don't forget, we'll be connecting again or gathering again at Device Talks West. It's happening October 19th and 20th at the Santa Clara Convention Center. Find out more information about that and about our upcoming Device Talks Tuesdays. All of that is on devicetalks.com. So, Renee, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It was awesome. And stay cool. Enjoy the summer.